Don, thank you for coming here. As you know, BRE Trust, in collaboration with G4C, is funding this research project, and the topic is open data. So how can open data help the construction industry to overcome the issues that we are facing, ahead of the 2025 milestone? The first thing I would like to do with you is to help people understanding what really open data is about. As usual, when innovation comes from IT, it's quite difficult to understand. And I think there is a very first necessary exercise we should be going through, which is simplifying the language, understanding a essential lexicon that we can share with the rest of the industry. Yeah. So my first question really is, what's open data?
Sure, that's absolutely fine. The key difference with open data versus any other type of information is that it's released. Open data is any data which an organisation chooses to share and make available to other people with no use restrictions, no licensing concerns, just raw information. The important thing that you have with open data is that it's also reusable. Alongside, there's no point just releasing all of the information you have in a series of Word documents or pieces of paper which you pin up to the door of your office. What you need to do is to make things available online. You need to make them available in a way which people can reuse. A good example from a local authority perspective would be a typical piece of open data would be, say, here's the location of every adventure playground within our borough. The equivalent piece of big data might say, here's the number of children who visit it, here's the times they visited it, here's the items they used in that adventure playground. What you get there is a very big data set which you can really learn a lot from, which says it informs about risk. For instance, if you have every child is only going on the big slide and nobody's going on the little slide, well, maybe you should consider putting some barriers around the big slide, because one of these days a child's going to slide straight off. Big data doesn't have to be open. If you're a construction company, you will deal with a lot of information that's big data. You don't have to release that, but you can do. There's not a one-to-one relationship between the two. If you focus and really commit to doing things with open data and big data, the benefits, I think, are shown to be huge, absolutely huge. I think it's fair to say that most organisations of any kind, public, private or charity, all have a geographic focus or an area that they tend to work in. Sometimes the whole country, sometimes a very small area, sometimes in the case of a building company, a particular site. Now, depending on the scale of those organisations, you are going to want to be able to map things. Effectively, all that mapping says is that you have pieces of information which you might have had before. Let's say you had a list of your customers. What mapping says is, well, if you can put an X and a Y coordinate, something which allows you to be placed on a map of the world, and you do that for that entire group of customers, you will then be able to not only view that information on a map, which the visual spread of information is a far easier thing and a far quicker thing to interpret than just looking at a list of information. It's a far quicker way to deliver a message. But what mapping really allows for is the combination with other things. That's its real power. But effectively, mapping is quite simply that. It's applying an X and a Y coordinate to anything to allow it to be placed on an actual map.
One of the reasons our industry is still losing out on other industry in terms of potential for growth is that the planning is still seen by investors as a great risk. It's a great risk and one from which is kind of hard to learn from. Certain risk mitigation processes may apply in one borough. You walk a few miles down the road is a completely different story. So, how do we help planning, helping the industry, helping economy?
Decisions aren't taken, planning officers don't make things up, they don't pull answers out of a hat, they don't sit there and flip over cards and say that's the answer. There is always a process that's gone through. It's making that process understandable to people. By understanding the process, you have a better opportunity, even if not of making a particular application successful, being able to learn something which you can take forward to the next one. So there is already a framework in place, a degree of standardisation in local authority systems, which it would be a big piece of work, but would be massively beneficial to make a single point where you could access planning information from across the country and not have to worry so much about what are civil administrative boundaries designed to create roughly proportionate electorates often. You know, it's not, the local authority boundaries are not the boundaries which most people recognise as boundaries in their lives, but they are. And so I think standardisation across the information which local authorities collect on planning applications is key. Also making the information which supports their decisions. Officers in a given area don't base their decision on things that are in their head. They have the planning application in front of them. They also combine it with the policy framework. A lot of that stuff is spatial. A lot of that stuff can be released as open data. Increasingly now, local authorities make that information available online, viewable on a map, and allows people to inform that decision. So let's say you're a developer, you want to put in a planning application, being able to know that where you're looking to build, you're not allowed to build anything more than 7 stories tall. I think there's a whole other area of open data that construction and indeed councils can take advantage of, which is in data which is actually already collected by other national organisations. Census, health, crime. Those people-focused data sets give a vast amount of data as to what's going on in a particular area, which no other organisation can make available to you and can't be collected. If community engagement's important, if consultation is part of the process that you're going through, which I'm pretty sure is the case for all large construction companies, being able to understand the area you are trying to build in or want to build in is of huge benefit. Knowing the socio-economic breakdown, knowing the health status, knowing the history and the changes in crime and the recording of crime in that particular area. All of these things help create an evidence base.
If crime, health and welfare could be combined in an openly accessible database against which developers would be able to suggest proposals, we may improve collaboration between the two parties.
Absolutely. I mean, most local authorities increasingly use most big organisations use business intelligence now, which is effectively about combining big data that you hold internally, sometimes sensitive, sometimes not, with big data that's available from other organisations to effectively, it's modelling really, for want of a better term, being able to have a collection of data which you can ask questions of. If I do this, what will happen to that? If I change X, what is the impact on Y? If I don't change X, what is the impact on Y? Being able to ask those quite simple questions of well combined, well put together data is a huge benefit. And I'd be surprised, most industries don't, I'd be very surprised if many construction companies have the kind of skill set within them to take advantage of that, which means those companies are missing out. I mean, my experience of dealing with developers and construction companies are the area of that company which will be best informed about what's going on in a particular area will be the marketing company. If the evidence base that you can provide as a construction company from previous sites that you've worked on, which show that actually through tracking your plant, through actually having mappable records of monitoring sites, you put up 6 air quality monitoring posts around the site that track how much dust there is in the air. Now you're able to take that, not only does it inform you for your own business, it also means you can present that as evidence to your next planning application and actually say, look, fair enough, we understand your concern as a local group that you don't want excessive noise levels. Here's the evidence, not just us saying we are ISO accredited, of course we won't do that, to actually say, here's the evidence from our last 4 major jobs, none of which have ever breached this particular level. That is going to help that put upon pressured planning officer to be able to make a more independent decision.
When community is truly engaged, change happens. And often projects are enriched by the input the community can give. Is open data able to help us on that?
The big thing, or the missing piece of the puzzle, is that the public and people who aren't within your organisation or even your industry will see things that which you will not. People who aren't hidebound by the industries and the areas we work in will look at something you release and see a completely different benefit. And As an organisation, you would never be able to think of that benefit, but members of the public will. They will see, for instance, we as a local authority did some work to release simple information around where all of our licensed premises are. So if you're a licensed premise, so if you have dancing, if you have music, if you have alcohol for sale, if you're any of these things, you all need different types of licensing. We released that information, and a member of the public saw an opportunity to create a restaurant app. Police have done a lot of work, and now the information that most police authorities release is very, very accurate as to where things happened. They make that data available, and if you go onto the police data website, there's a series of apps which other people have made using the police data. And some colleagues in the community safety team sent some information on and said, "Well, take a look at this app." And effectively what it does, it maps crime and plays, now this does sound quite fun, it plays an audio track as you approach the incident of a particular crime. That music changes according to the type of crime that took place there. Now, all jokes aside, it doesn't sound like a movie score. It's not somebody going, you know, as things kind of become more and more scary. It also changed volume according to the number of crimes, incidents recorded in that particular spot. So effectively, if you're walking around, let's say, you know, and again, the victims of crime tend to be young or very old. So, you know, you're 15, 16, a prime target for a whole host of street crime. This app would effectively, when you're walking along, when do you not see a teenager with earphones in, it would actually play a little piece of music over whatever you were listening to, which basically indicated that you were approaching an area, a crime hotspot.
Fantastic.
Lovely idea.
That's a lovely idea. Tom, thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.